everyone. Hello and welcome into today's conversation where we're going to be talking about the NFC North division. Is it bad? Is it good? Is it somewhere in between? What is the status of the NFC North as a whole after 7 weeks into the 2021 campaign? And the springboard for this comes from this previous weekend where we saw the Lions lose once again. They fall to 0-7. The Chicago Bears get absolutely destroyed by the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Green Bay Packers get what I think could be argued as an ugly win over the Washington football team. So, Minnesota Vikings did not participate. They are on the bye at 500 currently. Where does that leave us? So I saw a couple comments on social media last few days, and maybe even they started springing up these last few weeks about how the NFC North is not a good division. So just a real quick sort of overview about what this division is currently in the NFL, and I'm going to defend it for a minute here because I think that this division is actually kind of good, and I'll give you my reasonings why. So let's start at the bottom of the division where we currently have the Detroit Lions sitting at 0-7. Now, this is the last remaining winless team in the league, and you would think that that would automatically place the NFC North into the bottom tier of NFL divisions in terms of rankings. And I am here to argue that that is not the case because the Detroit Lions, despite not having a win this year, I still think are a good football team. And I'm surprised to be saying that because I don't think that the roster is very good or talented. Yes, they have had to deal with a lot of starters being injured this year. But as I have always said, injuries are something that plague all NFL teams. The injuries plague all sports franchises. It's just something that you have to deal with. Some years you're going to be on the wrong end of it. Some years it won't be as bad. But for this year, the injury bug has taken its toll on the Detroit Lions. That part of the conversation off to the side, I think the Detroit Lions are in good hands because Dan Campbell, in my opinion, is that dude. Despite having, poked a little bit of fun at him at the beginning of the year with his initial press conference where he was talking about biting off kneecaps, I think he brings enough to the table where this team is motivated. This team is a believer in the system and that they are going to fight hard tooth and nail, even though that no game for this team matters for the rest of the season now that they're 0-7. It would take an insurmountable winning streak for them to be relevant at the end of this campaign. So I think the future is bright. If they can draft well, they're clearly going to get a top 5 selection in next year's draft. So they'll get one of these prominent edge rushers coming out of college. And I think the atmosphere and culture that they've created is going to draw in some free agents buying into the Dan Campbell formula. So I think the record doesn't reflect it, but I think the Detroit Lions are on the up and up. They're trending upwards, if you will, despite not winning any games. And, it's hard to buy that argument, but that's the one that I'm laying out. Moving up at 3-4, the Chicago Bears, the aforementioned Bears that struggled against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, absolutely getting obliterated. I would argue that this is the worst team in the division right now, despite having won 3 games somehow. And it's amazing because they beat the Bengals, who are currently the number 1 seed in the AFC if the season were to end today. So that's just mind-blowing in and of itself. I am sympathetic to Chicago Bears fans. I think Matt Nagy needs to be fired. This entire coaching staff is garbage. The ownership is terrible. Ryan Pace needs to be out of a job. I don't know how you salvage this franchise given what the organization is, right? They have some really good players on this roster. Khalil Mack, Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery, Allen Robinson. I even like Darnell Mooney. And I'm going to continue to defend Justin Fields despite his very poor play so far throughout his rookie season, because I think that the team as a whole, with the philosophies, the incredibly stupid offense that Matt Nagy employs, the play calling is just atrocious. They look like they're just not prepared for anything. He's not an offensive guru. I think Justin Fields is a very good quarterback, and he's just in the worst position imaginable. Kind of like how Zach Wilson has been this year. I still think that trading up to get him was the right call, but as far as an organizational standpoint goes, they're absolutely blowing it. So Chicago Bears, easily the worst team in this division. Moving up from there in the standings, we have the Minnesota Vikings at 3-3. You could make an argument either way for this team. There are arguments that I would listen to that you could say that this team should be 5-1, maybe even 6-0. They went toe-to-toe with the Cardinals, toe-to-toe with the Cincinnati Bengals, which that loss now looks way better, knowing what we know now versus when it happened in week 1. We were all kind of on the other side of that conversation. Like, the Bengals are a bad team and Zach Taylor is a terrible coach. Why are you losing to the Bengals? But you know what? The Bengals have kind of proven themselves, having gone to Pittsburgh and Baltimore and taken both of those teams to the woodshed, the most recent one being Baltimore. So the Minnesota Vikings loss to the Bengals and the Cardinals look pretty good. And then you look at the Browns loss, their third loss of the season. You could argue that they probably could have won that game as well. And overall, Kirk Cousins is having one of his best seasons in a Vikings uniform, maybe his best season, if I could argue that. There's been some chatter about him potentially being amongst MVP candidates. So you could also argue the opposite, that this team could easily be, worse had they played some better opponents, not named the Seahawks, the Lions, and the Panthers, who, despite me having just made the argument that the Lions are a good football team, it's still a not very talented roster. The Carolina Panthers have been exposed as frauds, and the Seattle Seahawks are just having a down year, a mega down year, if you will. So the Vikings are an enigma. We don't really know what they are yet, but they have a chance to prove themselves here in the coming weeks. And then you have the Packers, who, other than week 1, have looked pretty good. So I think the Packers should continue to establish dominance in this regular season, in this division. Devontae Adams looks like he's going to be lost for Thursday Night Football coming up. And, I don't think that that's going to be a huge problem, other than he has just been lights out. It's weird how we don't have wide receivers and ever get into the MVP conversation like we do with all the quarterbacks and running backs. But, he's been fantastic this season. But as long as Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, I don't foresee them really falling off the table anytime soon. So they should probably win this division handily, as long as something doesn't, crumble to the ground, as the season goes on. So that is my take on the NFC North division. Let me know what you think about the status of this division, these 4 teams. Is this a good division? Is it a bad division? Is it somewhere in the middle? I think it's... I don't think it's in the top tier, but I think it's definitely somewhere in the middle tier with a lot of potential. And that may take a few years to be realized, given the Lions are in the state that they are. But I don't think it's the worst division in football, at least not right now. That could change over the course of the next few weeks. So we'll see where we go. We'll see what happens. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will see you in the next one.